My name is King Potassium, and despite being a fan of Pokemon for nearly 13 years now, I've never actually beaten any of the games that take place in the Johto region. I've just never been that interested in the region or its Pokemon, but ever since Game Freak has decided to give some love to the Johto region, maybe I should too, by doing a Nuzlocke of Pokemon HeartGold. The rules of the Nuzlocke are simple. You can only catch your first encounter on each route, you must nickname each encounter, you can't use any healing items or any items at all during battle, and if any Pokemon faints in any way, shape, or form, it's game over for that encounter, they're dead and no longer usable. I've kind of avoided Pokemon HeartGold, especially with a Nuzlocke, for a long time, because it's infamous for bad encounters, a super easy mid-game after a brutal early game, and ridiculous level caps that just don't make sense. But I'm kind of running out of games I can play anyways, so without further ado, let's get into the world of Pokemon again. Professor Elm decides to ask me, a 10-year-old, to go find an egg from an old man, and gives me a gift to help with my quest. I get to choose of one of 3 starters, but I pick the obviously best one, Totodile, who I nicknamed Dim Sum. On my way back from this incredibly strange quest, this terribly written quote-unquote character who is supposed to be my rival misses his first attack of the entire run, so I don't think he'll be much of an issue. We're given free reign to go on our travels, so on Route 30 I can begin the Nuzlocke by finding Muffin the Rattata. While a lack of guts is disappointing, the naughty nature makes up for it in tenfold. In the Dark Cave I can catch Cheeseball the Geodude, who is pretty much a guaranteed win against both Faulkner and Bugsy. And by waiting for night in Violet City, definitely didn't change the time on my very real DS, I can enter the Sprout Tower and catch a Ghastly. I also remember that right before I take on Faulkner, you can go onto Route 32 early, so I head down there and catch Stu the Mareep. The Adamant nature isn't great at all, but an electric type is nothing to scoff at, especially in this region, since the champion is a flying type trainer after all. Stu the Mareep, despite having a minus special attack nature, is able to click Thundershock a bunch of times against Faulkner, allowing us to win the first batch of the run, and pretty much sail us into an easy early game, right? Since I kicked Faulkner's bird Pokemon, Professor Elm sends me a mystery egg that one of them laid in fear of seeing Stu the Mareep coming back. So in New Bark Town, I forego any fishing encounters and run around and hatch the mystery egg, and it hatches into a Togepi who somehow has the Serene Grace ability, so this little baby is immediately going on the team. Psst. Hey, don't tell future me you can't evolve Togetic into Togekiss until the post-game? I don't want to burst his bubble yet. I can then return on my quest to beat all the gym leaders, and I run into the evil Team Rocket that apparently is returning and making a massive shock against the Johto region, but these guys are kind of jokes the entire run. So we're just going to jump into the Bugsy fight, since, you know, Bugsy can be a problem for most runs, but I have Cheeseball the Geodude, and a Rock Throw is able to one-shot Scyther. And his other 2 Pokemon suck. Okay, well that's fun. This game's supposed to be hard, right? Well anyways, the totally well-written rival Poop challenges us to a battle after seeing us steamroll a bunch of bugs, leading his offense with a Ghastly. However, Omelette, the surprisingly decent, can take out the Ghastly with a single critical extrasensory, bringing in the Zubat. The Zubat unfortunately hits a Confuse Ray, but Omelette can break through the confusion and hit another extrasensory, which unfortunately doesn't get the kill. A bite from Zubat does decent damage, but then Omelette just immediately snaps out of confusion and hits the Zubat, taking it down, bringing in Bayleaf. I feel like this would be a good time to mention I don't like the Chikorita line, and this Nuzlocke did not help its reputation. This time around, I decided to do something smart in one of my Nuzlockes and use Yawn to serenade the Bayleaf to sleep. The Bayleaf just decides to set up a Reflect, and on the next turn, a Razor Leaf does less damage than I expected, and an Extrasensory does about as much damage as I expected. As the Bayleaf falls asleep, I swap into the previously unmentioned Pierogi, who does nothing in this run except for this battle, so I totally forgot to keep the segment about him in. Ha ha ha! The Bayleaf wakes up early though and hits Pierogi with a Poison Powder, while I just go for a Sand Attack. I set up another Sand Attack and the Bayleaf heals the 4 damage it took with Synthesis, but this does end the Reflect, so now I have a plan. Since I know that the Bayleaf is going to go for a Reflect, I can safely go for a Gust, which does pitiful damage, but since the Bayleaf is more interested in healing, we trade pointless turns for a bit until I finally grow a Brain and swap into Muffin as the Bayleaf just heals. Muffin hits a Bite that does next to nothing while the Bayleaf hits a Poison Powder, but luckily the Reflect wears off, so now Muffin can hit a strong Hyper Fang as the Bayleaf just sets up another Reflect. I fish for a Flinch flinch from a bite, but instead the Bayleaf just gets a super powerful Razor Leaf, plus with the added poison, Muffin is taken down to 8 HP. So I have to swap again, this time into Stu, who dodges a Razor Leaf, and then Stu also dodges a Poison Powder and hits a Thunder Wave. And since suddenly this stupid grass hole dinosaur can hit water falling out of a boat, it just becomes a chip damage game until finally the Bayleaf goes down, winning us the worst rival battle I've ever had. This battle, if anything, is nothing short of a miracle. Because it's a miracle I didn't slit my throat halfway through that asinine excuse for a competitive player's wet dream. In the Ilex Forest, I can find a Caterpie who I nicknamed Goulash. As well, inside the Ilex Forest, I can find the Headbutt Man, and I can return to Azalea Town where I managed to find Dumpling the Heracross. This thing is incredible, especially since Dumpling has an adamant nature. No Guts ability is kind of disappointing, but it doesn't really matter since in Goldenrod City, I can just get the Sword Stance TM from the Voltorb flip game, and that pretty much means that Dumpling can just easily tank a Metronome Hyper Fang from Clefairy, dodge an attack from Miltank, and demolish what is considered by many to be one of the hardest gym leaders of all time. Yeah, I just brushed aside Whitney in my Nuzlocke video. Welcome to King Potassium's channel. We struggle with random battles that don't matter at all, and we wipe the ones that are difficult. On Route 37, I can catch Garlic Bread the Growlithe. No Intimidate isn't great, but just having a Fire type is honestly enough considering how rare they tend to be. The next battle is going to be quite tough. I've heard nightmare stories about Morty, so I decided to do a few interesting things. For starters, I evolved Togepi into Togetic, and I also run around and battle as many people as I can in order to get as much money from my mother. See, at the beginning of the game, you can donate some of your money, and by doing so, she'll send you items periodically. And I've been sent some pretty good ones, such as the Muscle Band and the Choice Scarf. And I haven't been using them up until this point, but I feel like Morty is a perfect line between this game is difficult just because we made everything in the early game super difficult, and this game is actually going to be kind of difficult. And believe me, Morty is going to be kind of difficult anyways, because he is never a fun battle, as the entire game uses tons of status effects to cover for bad AI, and Morty is pretty much the poster child for this. Morty leads with his Ghastly, and I lead with Omelette. The Ghastly goes for a curse, which allows Omelette to KO the floating puffball of pain, only having to take a little bit of damage from the curse. So in comes the first Haunter, who outspeeds Omelette and hits a Hypnosis. This plus more curse damage makes me want to swap out. I decide Goulash the Butterfree as my weapon of choice, as the Haunter just goes for a Dream Eater, which fails, obviously. The Haunter sets up another curse, but Compound Eyes Goulash is able to hit his Sleep Powder, putting the Haunter to sleep and taking small damage from a curse. I decide to swap out again, this time into Muffin, who's evolved into Eradicate, who can safely take out the Haunter with a Crunch on the next turn. So in comes Morty's Gengar, his real problem Pokemon. The Gengar immediately hits a Sucker Punch for about a fourth, while Muffin almost gets the instant KO with another Crunch. A held Citrus Berry takes the Gengar out of healing range, and so on the next turn a missed Hypnosis from Gengar allows Muffin to finish off the strangely super popular Pokemon that I don't really understand the popularity of, leaving only the second Haunter. However, a single Crunch is enough to OHKO the Haunter, winning us one of the hardest battles of the run without a single death. Believe me, that's going to be a trend with this video. Not much happens in between the battle against Morty and the battle against Chuck, so let's just hop right into Chuck time. In my second attempt, I painfully wiped to Chuck's Poliwrath, and this time, I'm looking for revenge. Chuck is such a schmuck that he leads with Primeape, who takes massive damage from Dumpling's Aerial Ace, and since it only goes for Lyra on the next turn, Dumpling can blow that pig monkey thing out of the sky! So that only leaves Poliwrath, my favorite Generation 2 fighting type. Dumpling outspeeds and hits a strong Aerial Ace before being put to sleep by a Hypnosis. However, since Dumpling takes very little damage from most of Poliwrath's attacks, even with a defense drop, I decide to stay in and try to wake up. But since Dumpling isn't like every opponent Pokemon, he doesn't wake up in 2 turns, so I have to swap. I decide Omelette must bear this burden, swapping into a Surf that does about a third. I decide to take a risk for a Yawn, but the Poliwrath goes first and hits a Body Slam, plus gain the paralysis doesn't help. But since Omelette is made of steel, currently, he does not care and hits a Yawn anyways. I'm not willing to make risky plays at the moment, so I swap into Souffle, the Mantine, who, much like the late Pierogi, who's currently rotting in my PC, didn't get discussed earlier because he's only used here. As the Poliwrath falls asleep, I can swap again, this time into Stu the Ampharos, who can witness the second turn wake up from Poliwrath and tank a Surf, and retaliate with a brutal Thunderbolt that leaves the Poliwrath belly up, meaning we can receive our 5th gym badge. After beating up Chuck and realizing that water types are actually kinda good, I can return to Route 40 and fish up a Starmie, who I nicknamed Scallops. The rash nature is incredible, and I've wanted to use a Starmie for a long time, so believe me, I am very excited. However, this excitement doesn't last, as while trying to find a grass encounter for Route 47, I run into a double battle that ends up costing me Meatloaf the Haunter. However, I don't let this death get me down, as on Route 43, I can catch Flanksteak the Girafarig. In my first attempt, this little horsey carried me through most of the late game, so let's hope this time around he's just as useful. Oh yeah, there's a Price battle here. Price is such a pushover that's really not worth talking about him at all. It's more interesting to talk about the fact that, for some reason, he's the 7th gym leader, but he's a level lower than the 6th gym leader. So honestly, Price is kind of one of the most pathetic gym leaders in the entire franchise, if you ask me. Giving Ice types a really bad name. Speaking of the 6th gym leader, we go back and we fight Jasmine, but that's also super pathetic and really easy. So I'm just going to jump right into the final push against Team Rocket, which also is super easy and really boring and makes me want to gouge my eyes out. Man, this late game just is not great, is it? The only battle that's even of significance is Petrol, who's usually a massive issue for Nuzlockers, but it turns out he's easily walled by Choice Specs Flanksteak. So I can head on to the Icy Path, where I can catch this questionable quote-unquote Pokémon who I nicknamed Ramen. I'm just glad I caught it before it was problematic. Oh no. However, after beating the Icy Path, I am faced with what I believe to be one of the most dangerous battles in the run. Claire is difficult, because before the Fairy type was introduced in Generation 6, the Dragon type reigned supreme. With only a weakness to Ice and Dragon, both of which being some of the rarest types in the game, I have my work cut out for me. Claire luckily leads with a non-Dragon type Dragon, whilst I lead with Stew. A Dragon Breath does a nice 40 damage to Stew, meanwhile a Thunder Punch is enough for an Oko, even thanks to an attack drop from Gyarados' Intimidate. But much like most of Johto's gym leaders, Claire has 2 repeat Pokemon, this time being Dragonair, and Claire sends out her first one now. Since one of them has Fire Blast and the other one has Aqua Tail, and I don't know which one is out and which one is still in her team, I can't swap in my ace in the hole for this battle. Dragonair doesn't go for a move that gives it away, going for a Thunder Wave to paralyze Stew. Yes, both of them have Thunder Wave. This is a really fun battle, guys, I swear. But Stew can just hit a Cotton Spore to harshly drop the Dragonair's speed, allowing me to, on the next turn, after Stew is hit by a strong Dragon Pulse and also paralyzed, make a risky swap into Dim Sum, who's been sitting on the sidelines for a little while now. Dim Sum takes about a 4th from a Dragon Pulse, and then on the next turn, I decide to go for an Agility while the Dragonair just hits a Thunder Wave. Whoops. Kinda forgot about that. Despite the paralysis, Dim Sum completely ignores his ailments and hits an Ice Fang, and it doesn't one-shot like I originally thought it would. Well, another Dragon Pulse takes Dim Sum down to the yellow, so on the next turn, as Claire heals her Dragonair, Dim Sum can hit a strong Ice Fang that takes the blue Sneck down low, but it also gets the 10% freeze. Since I have a safe swap currently, I decide to swap into my ace in the hole, and surprisingly a Pokemon that I really like now, Ramen the Jinx, and luckily the Dragonair thaws out, meaning that we're fully safe. With the Never Melt Ice, Ramen does a nasty amount of damage with an Ice Beam, so I'm able to Ice Beam the first Dragonair to the ground, bringing in the other Dragonair, who I assume has Fire Blast. But it doesn't matter, because Ramen can just instantly snipe the Dragonair with another Ice Beam, so that only leaves Claire's real threat, Kingdra. Well, the Kingdra just goes for cheap tactics like lowering my accuracy. Ugh, who would do that? I use a Fake Tears to neuter the special defense of the Wet Dragon. A Hydro Pump on the next turn does massive damage, but I can just use another Fake Tears to pretty much confirm that as long as I use a good special attacker, I can pretty much just bury this thing instantly. And I decided the special attacker of choice will be Flanksteak, but she takes big damage from a Dragon Pulse on the switch in. But since I'm like 70% sure Flanksteak will outspeed, I go for a Psychic, and Flanksteak outspeeds, taking out the Kingdra and winning us the final gym battle of the run. Oh, and this right now is when I discover that Omelette won't be able to evolve until after the Elite Four, so guess who's getting dumped? Before I go into the very end of the game, on Route 45 I can catch a Phampi. On Route 45 I can catch a Phampi that I nicknamed Tiramisu, one of the last encounters of the game, but easily one of the most important ones for the next battle. Since before I can beat the game, I need to take on the Kimono Girls, which is a battle against 5 trainers back to back. On my first attempt of this run, I actually lost here after completely misunderstanding the battle, believing I could pick which one I fought first. Now though, I wasn't making the same mistake again. I choose Dumpling as my lead for all 5 battles, as he has a pretty good matchup into the first battle, being an Umbreon who's instantly shattered by a Brick Break. Call that animal abuse. Nope, gonna cut that. Do not say that. The second battle is against Espeon, but since a Psychic doesn't kill unless it crits, Dumpling can take a Psychic attack and retaliate with a Shadow Claw, which turns the Espeon to ribbons. So that brings in the third one, Flareon, and since Dumpling baits a Fire Blast, I can safely swap into Garlic Bread, who is evolved into Arcanine, who has the Flash Fire ability, nullifying the Fire Blast. The Flareon cannot touch Garlic Bread, so the Fluffy Doggo can crunch the Flareon twice, leading us to our fourth battle, which is against Jolteon. However, since low HP Dumpling baits a Thunderbolt, I can swap into the new teammate Tiramisu, the Dawn fan, to neutralize the Thunderbolt. Then on the next turn, the Jolteon goes for a double team, while Tiramisu misses an Earthquake. And then and I'm not even kidding, for 9 turns, the Jolteon just goes for double team, and Tiramisu just keeps missing Earthquakes. Funnily enough, on the last Earthquake PP I have, Tiramisu finally decides to hit an Earthquake, leaving us with the only battle left, which is against one of the strongest evolutions, Vaporeon. The only problem is that Vaporeon really can't hurt electric types, and I've got Stu the Ampharos. So after tanking a Surf, Stu can zap the Vaporeon, winning us the Gauntlet. Hey, a quick side note here. The Ho-Oh final theme is, like, fantastic, right? I just want to talk about that, mostly because it's either talk about this or talk about the final rival battle where literally nothing happens. So I'd rather talk about the fact that, wow, they really did Ho-Oh right with this theme. So we're just going to jump into the Elite Four stuff. Going into the Elite Four is a team of 6 hand-picked Pokemon that I think can take us to the end. No Boston the Claydol here. No. These are the cream of the crop. Leading the team of 6 is Dim Sum the Feraligatr. This pure water type has great physical attack and bulk, 2 of the only thing water types are actually pretty good at. Plus, with a diverse moveset of Waterfall, Ice Fang, Crunch, and Protect, Dim Sum is here to wash away the competition. Second up is Flankstake the Girafarig. This little horse hard carried the latter half of the run, and being that this Pokemon has a diverse moveset, great typing, and also well-balanced stats, yeah, you're coming with me, donkey. Third is the newest addition to the team, Garlic Bread the Arcanine. Despite being the fresh meat of the team, Garlic Bread has one thing I desperately always need in these runs, the fire typing. Plus, the adamant nature pretty much just means that Arcanine can do anything but hit softly. Fourth is our little Stu, who honestly is here just because electric stab moves are really good in the Lance's team. That's really it. Fire and bug coverage is nothing to scoff at. Don't disrespect Ampharos like that. I see you. Typing in the comments down there, oh, you're bringing Ampharos to the elite team, why not bring, a good Pokemon? You shut your mouth. Anyways, fifth up is the MVP of the run, Dumpling the Heracross. Dumpling hits like a truck, and so that's pretty much all he's here to do. Hit like a truck. And last but certainly not least is the sleeper agent, Scallops the Starmie. I adore Starmie, and this is the first time in any of my runs that I'll actually be taking one to the Elite Four. Great moveset, strong, fast special attacker. This thing is pretty much a perfect example of how to make a good psychic type. So you know what? Let's rock this popsicle shop. Our first Elite Four battle is against Will the Psychic Trainer, but Choice Scarf Garlic Bread is able to crunch all of Will's Pokemon. Yep, that was something. Next up is ex-gym leader Koga. He's a pushover in his gym, so let's see if he carries that over to his Elite Four reign. Well, he leads with an Ariados, so I feel like I have my answer. I lead with Flankstake, who can outspeed and break Ariados' mind, resigning him to a psychiatric ward for the rest of his miserable bug life. One bug baits in another, however, bringing in the only Pokemon on Koga's team I'm actually scared of, Fortress. Don't get me wrong, this thing is not scary, it just knows Explosion, and Explosion was broken in Generation 4. So since I know Flankstake cannot kill, I decide to swap in Dim Sum, while the Fortress just goes for Toxic Spikes. I decide to alternate between Protect and Waterfall, but since the big metal bug bomb doesn't seem interested in going boom, it becomes very easy, though a very long knockout. This then brings in Muck. A Waterfall does half while the Sludge Pile just goes for a Minimize like a coward. So on the next turn, Dim Sum misses while the Muck just hits a Toxic. Dim Sum decides to hit another Waterfall, but it barely just misses the kill thanks to Muck holding a Black Sludge. Koga just goes for another Minimize though, so I decide to swap into Flankstake again, who gets poisoned by the Toxic Spikes as Koga just heals. I didn't know to be a ninja, you had to be a cheap coward. However, Koga's cowardness was all for naught as Flankstake can just hit a Psychic, which is enough to take out the Muck, baiting in Crobat. Koga tries to be cheap again, going for a double team, but Flankstake just doesn't care and hits an uber powerful Psychic, taking down Crobat and leaving only Koga's Venomoth. But if you thought, for a moment, that Venomoth would do anything but die to a single Psychic, then you clearly don't know what Flankstake is here to do. With Koga mourning the mental deterioration of his Ariados, we can move on to face the third Elite Four member, Bruno. Okay, let's get this over with. Gen 1 Bruno is a joke, and Gen 2 Bruno is not much better. Bruno leads with a Hitmontop while I lead with Flankstake again. Unfortunately, the Psychic just misses the KO, but since the Hitmontop just goes for a counter, for some reason. We just have to waste a healing term from Bruno and then take the Beyblade out. This brings in Hitmonlee, but a single Psychic melts Hitmonlee's walnut-sized brain. Machamp is third, but just like Hitmonlee, this thing can't fathom... Oh. Wait, this thing's got a higher IQ than I thought. Machamp survives with plenty of health, heals up to half with a Citrus Berry, and proceeds to crack Flank Steak with a Cross Chop. Who survives with 27 HP. And since I know Flank Steak outspeeds, I can safely go for a Psychic that takes out the Machamp. Bruno decides to continue flexing his masculinity by sending out his Rock Snake. While a Psychic would most likely take out the Onix, I don't want to risk it, so I decide to swap into Scallops instead. The Onix hits a decently strong Earthquake on the swap, but on the next turn, Scallops can just handily outspeed and Oko the compensation with a single Surf. So Bruno, realizing that his fragile masculinity is slowly falling apart, he brings in his scariest Pokemon, Hitmonchan. With all the elemental punches, there are barely any types that can avoid a super effective attack from this thing. Predicting the Thunder Punch though, I can swap into Stu, who basically takes no damage from the said predicted Thunder Punch. On the next turn, Hitmonchan hits a strong Fire Punch, but then gets paralyzed by Stu's Static. Funnily enough though, the Static doesn't matter, as Stu can just hit a critical Thunderbolt, winning us the battle against Bruno, and taking us further into the run. Last, but certainly not least for the Elite Four, is Karen. And while she may not want to talk to my manager, she can be relatively tough if you aren't prepared. But I'm not a fool. I was born ready. Or, well, I was born semi-ready. I was born slightly ready. I'm not ready for this. Karen leads with her Umbreon while I lead with the so far unused Dumpling. But Dumpling was really just brought to deal with this team, as Dumpling can hit a Brick Break that just barely misses the kill, while the Umbreon channels his inner Koga and goes for a double team. On the next turn, Karen heals while I just miss. Dumpling redeems himself, however, by hitting a Brick Break that, again, just misses the KO as the Umbreon goes for a double team again. However, this is why I led with Dumpling, as on the next turn, a never miss Aerial Ace can take out the troublesome Umbreon. This baits in the Murkrow, so I can swap into Dim Sum, who can tank a Pluck like a Florida Man tanks a Gator Bite. Another Pluck does pitiful damage, while an Ice Fang doesn't get the KO. Well, another Pluck doesn't kill Dim Sum, so a second Ice Fang takes out Big Bird's evil cousin, Small Mafia Bird. I proved that my swap to Dim Sum was totally tactical and not at all a mistake when Vileplume swaps in. So I can send in Garlic Bread, who takes minimal damage from the Vileplume's Petal Dance, and then on the next turn, a single Fire Fang takes out the evil Flower, which brings in... Wait, Gengar? Okay, hold on, pause everything. I have to confess something. Up until this point, most of my exposure to Generation 2 was through the ROM hack Storm Silver. So I totally believe that Karen had a Tyranitar in this game. I was very confused as to why Gengar came out, because I'd gaslit myself into thinking Tyranitar was her ace, and that thing was going to have super effective damage. So just a little fun fact about this battle. However, this whole misunderstanding doesn't affect anything, as the Gengar doesn't go for Destiny Bond, so a critical crunch takes out the evil Spirit Gas thing, leaving only Houndoom. But unfortunately, I made another mistake. I thought this Houndoom had Flash Fire, when it doesn't, so I go for a Thunder Fang, which misses, letting the Devil Dog set up a nasty plot. This is not good. Garlic Bread can hit a Thunder Fang on the next turn, which luckily gets the paralysis, but that doesn't stop the Houndoom from hitting a Dark Pulse, which instantly snuffs out Arcanine's Light, killing him on the spot. That hurts a lot. I'd grown to love Garlic Bread as he had helped us through thick and thin at the end here, but a life lost is not a life wasted. Garlic Bread took the shot and allowed us to safely swap Dim Sum in, knowing this would be the best choice to get through this monster with as few deaths as possible. Dim Sum can come in and immediately get the revenge kill, washing away the Houndoom with a Waterfall, winning us the battle against the final Elite Four member, leaving us only with one battle left. The battle? Against Champion Lance. After everything, Lance stands there, cape swaying in the wind, ready to face whatever we have coming his way. But he's not the only one who's prepared for anything. There's just one difference between him and me. I'm not losing another Nuzlocke. Lance leads with his Gyarados, while I lead with Stu. And Intimidate doesn't mean squat, as Stu can easily handle a strong Waterfall and return the favor with a super effective Thunderbolt that easily sends the big fish packing, bringing in Lance's first Dragonite, which just so happens to be his strongest one. Unfortunately, I know Stu has outlived his use in this battle, so I wipe away tears as Stu is taken out by an Outrage. Just like with Garlic Bread though, this sacrifice is not in vain, as we can then bring in Scallops. Scallops is able to come in, and thanks to a held Never Melt Ice, can freeze the Dragonite in his tracks with an Ice Beam, knocking it out of the battle. Lance then sends in his other Dragonite, but another Ice Beam shatters this one too. So Lance, learning nothing apparently, sends in his third Dragonite, which also goes down swiftly. Thanks for letting me KO half your team easily, Lance, you big knob. Lance then displays that he might actually have some brain cells in there when he sends in his Aerodactyl, which can outspeed Scallops in his super effective crunch that takes my Psychic Starfish down to 23 HP when Ice Beam just barely misses the KO. Lance heals his Prehistoric Bird while I go for another Ice Beam. Then we do it again. Then we do it again. Then I realize I'm out of Ice Beam PP thanks to Aerodactyl's pressure ability. So when I go for a Surf on the Aerodactyl, it finally hits another crunch, taking down Scallops. I decide my next best play is to bring in Dim Sum, who takes big damage from a Thunderfang and unfortunately gets the paralysis. Plus, the Thunderfang gets the flinch. This is starting to look grim. My big Gator is able to survive another Thunderfang, and finally luck is on our side as Dim Sum doesn't get paralyzed and hits a strong Waterfall that takes down the Aerodactyl, leaving only Lance's final Pokemon, and Game Freak's favorite, Charizard. I accept that Dim Sum needs to go down, allowing his fate to be sealed by an Air Slash from the Flaming Dragon, leaving me with 2 Pokemon remaining. I decide I want one less casualty, choosing to send in Flank Stake. A Psychic seems to do about half while the Charizard hits a strong Air Slash that leaves Flank Stake with only 56 HP. But since the Honorary Dragon doesn't get a crit, this battle is won, as on the next turn I can safely hit a Choice Specs boosted Psychic that fries the Charizard. And thanks to the sacrifices of Garlic Bread, Stew, Scallops, and Dim Sum, we've become the champions of the Johto region, and have officially completed a Nuzlocke of Pokemon HeartGold. Now I know these games have a very, very long post-game with a whole different final boss, but my very legitimate copy of Pokemon HeartGold isn't able to save, so it crashes and wipes the save upon beating the champion. Lol. It's all good though, as I feel like this is as far as I want to take this run anyways. Pokemon HeartGold abused me with bad luck and even worse encounter tables, and that's really all a man can take. Besides, the team I beat this game with is possibly my favorite final team in any of my Nuzlocke so far. Everyone put in the work, and I genuinely don't think I could bring myself to replace any of them. As well, I have some work left in Hoenn to complete. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. I hope you'll check out more of my stuff, and I hope to see you all later. Don't worry, there are more Nuzlocke runs on the horizon. See you then.